I'm Bill Cassells. I am the principal and lead trainer in Oxalate, which is a training company. We offer the full range of P600 series LEV focused courses on the BOHS syllabus. And we also do W201, which is the basic one, the basic principles of occupational hygiene. It was an incredible surprise. It came out the blue, and indeed it was yourself who sent me the email notifying me. And I had to check the email because I thought it was a spam or something, because it was completely unexpected. It is a great honor. And for me, the greatest of honors are the ones which come to you through your professional peers, if you like, a recognition by your peers. And that made it incredibly special for me. It is a prestigious award. And always in these cases, it's a little bit unfair because I've received this award, but really because of and through the support of quite an extensive group of professional friends and colleagues who over the years have kept me right. They've challenged me, they've helped to hone in some of my thoughts and ideas, and most importantly, and they know who they are, they keep me firmly rooted to the ground, if you like, and I owe them a great debt of gratitude. I mean, highlights come they're like mountain ranges, you know, they come in little ones and big ones, and there have been many in my life. I did another recent webinar interview when people said, you know, what's been the great highlight so far? And I jokingly, but to some extent seriously said, lasting this long, and maybe without being found out, because, like, you know, I always feel that I'm not quite there with some of the other professionals that I see around me. My life has been dictated by people with the name Frank. And certainly in the early days, I was very fortunate when I did my research degree to have two supervisors. One was an architect of all things called Frank, and one was a professor of medical biology, also called Frank. And they were completely nuts. They were both quite eccentric, lovable, and incredibly gifted people. So they molded some of my early thoughts and processes, if you like, and passed on to me some great, if you like, objectives for myself in life. And they were things like, for example, the architect would challenge everything. If you do it the same way, he would say, you're the same everything, which is a kind of a paraphrase of Einstein, I believe. So I was at the very early stage, I was encouraged to challenge what was there before. The other Frank was, he was incredibly passionate about life and well-being. So the two of them worked on me, and when I finished my research, I joined HSE because that was where they felt I could fulfill these passions, if you like. And it was a great highlight in my life to be engaged as an HM inspector. It was quite weird because I joined initially as a general inspector. But as soon as I walked through the door, I remember Martin, my principal at the time, said to me, "Oh, you're a specialist in LEV?" And I said, no, I'm not. I'd done a research degree in a topic related to recirculating carbon filters that could be used in fume cupboards, incidentally, to prove that it was very difficult to make them work with confidence. But there you go. Incidentally, one of the Franks I remember taught me that failure and success are both the same. They're both part of the same kind of thing. They're part of learning. And I remember being quite distraught after 3-4 years of my life not getting this thing to work, and proving why it couldn't work, and him telling me that success and failure, each one is as important as the other. And that lasted through to today, where I take education as incredibly important, and we learn from the bad. We learn, I mean, health and safety executive, we learn from other people's tragic accidents and disease and so on. So we learn from those failures and we move forward. So it's all an educational learning process. But anyway, I joined HSE and they said, oh, you're this expert in LEV, you need to join our specialist team. So I was seconded at very early days to this LEV team, staffed by engineers and very competent people. And I knew nothing about this. But I jolly well learned very quickly, because there's one thing about an HSE training period, if you like. Within a very short space of time, you find out all the things that can go wrong and will go wrong, and what will the outcomes be and the likely outcomes. But it also gives you an insight on how it can be rectified, how it can be stopped, how it can be controlled. So that was a great eye-opener working within HSE. It's still today the skills that I learned on analysis of situations and how to dissect them, to find the key elements, that stays with me today. I have, as well as a trainer, I've been an expert witness for the UK courts on occupational disease, and that skill is such a simple skill, but it works very, very well when you're analysing and preparing a report for the courts. So when I left HSE, and it was some of the best years of my life, it's possibly, looking back, those years were the best employed position that I ever held. Enjoyed it very, very much. But I had a fire burning inside to go and do things that couldn't be done within HSE. And so I formed a consultancy. We were, in the early days, we were health and safety and occupational hygiene, LEV obviously in that, and a little bit of environmental monitoring. And we had a fantastic team with 23 staff, really very enjoyable working atmosphere. And I just felt very, very happy with the whole idea of offering consultancy. But then training came back in again. I'd done little bits of training with HSE internally, funnily enough on ergonomics, but that's another long story. And we started doing some of the early training courses in LEV, and started the first training course. There had been other bits and pieces, but we set up a 3-day training course, which was, I guess, the forerunner to the P600 series. It wasn't quite in the same mold, but along similar lines. And eventually, that organization, we had an approach from a large PLC, and it seemed like a very good deal to take. So we were acquired by a firm from Leeds, and it went very well. I think my wife is not listening to this, so I can admit that I have some traits, like I can be quite stubborn at times, a little bit eccentric, and I think some of those traits don't quite conform to large organizations. So I worked with the PLC for a couple of years, and then decided it was time to move on. But in that time, I had been developing the training side of our business, and it was just falling into place. It was exactly what my personality and what my hopes and aspirations, just all focused down into training. And I really enjoyed it. Sometimes I like to be a bit of a showman, which doesn't, the new webinar series don't quite allow for that, but I love face-to-face training, and I like to see people coming with maybe not quite got the confidence that they can do this, because the proficiency certificates are quite serious courses, and I love seeing those people gain in confidence and develop. It really is quite satisfying. So those have been some of my highlights. I thought you might have asked me, Lee, if I've done anything odd, and those have been highlights. And I was trying to think of some, and many people know that I've been a farmer for a number of years, part-time. I guess now you would call me a gentleman farmer, although that's a kind of misnomer, because when I go out in my ragged clothes in the pouring rain, I certainly don't look anything like a gentleman. But through that, we've done all sorts of things. So I'm a mole trapper. I'm a qualified firearms instructor, which is interesting. And I'm a bus driver. So these have all been little eccentric highlights in my life, and there are too many others. Life hasn't got enough hours in the day to do all the things I'd like to do. And that's why it has always been very full. I think if you have a passion and an interest for anything, you follow it, because that enthusiasm and excitement and brain function follows you into everything else you do. And the practical example, Lee, I can give you of that was that I was very fortunate to do some work in Japan. And I was going around a factory in Japan with my contact there, and he pointed out a lady. She was working as a supervisor in a packaging line, and he pointed out this lady, and she said, "That lady is the Japanese champion canary breeder." And I looked at him and I said, what made you employ the Japanese champion canary breeder? He said, "If that woman can get to the pinnacle of a very competitive marketplace, if you like, then if I can excite her in the job that I want her to do, she can do it, because she's done it in canary, she can do it in packaging." And that's a fantastic idea to take forward. So if someone says to me, I play trumpet, I'll give them a job, because if you can focus and you can be really good at something outside work, then you can do it in work. It's a matter of interest. When we had our own consultancy with 23 staff, we had a ruling that if you got any qualification whatsoever, I can't remember the value, I think it was 40p, you got 40p an hour pay rise. So you could go off and do an accounts O-level. It was, people could do evening courses and whatnot, or they could do French or whatever. We didn't mind. We wanted people to keep stimulating their mind so that it would keep the brain active, so that when they were on our book time, we had a very stimulated, active person brain-wise. And it was certainly a very successful way to go. So I've loved it. I've done so many different things. And it also doesn't matter what you do. You have to do it with passion. I have a young son, and I have a young man who's 30 now, who works a lot on our farm, and he's a digger driver. Now, I have to say, this young man is a passionate, incredibly competent and professional digger driver. He's the best I've seen. And he said to me one day, you wouldn't be happy, given who you are and what you've done, you wouldn't be happy if your son became a digger driver like me. I said, Fred, I would be, I would be quite ecstatic for the boy if he was passionate about it, if that's what he wanted to do. It doesn't matter that he's not got some college qualification or whatever. You have to do what really drives you. I think it has to be control in broadest sense, and narrowing that down, engineering control in the form of local exhaust ventilation. That has been my central focus in my life. It's the area that I have spent most time and effort in. I think it's now my mission in that area would be to try and raise the professional standing of LEV specialists. Now, we have to say that LEV specialists maybe come from two different angles. You'll have the pure occupational hygienists who come into local exhaust ventilation, and you have perhaps the more fundamental engineers who come into local exhaust ventilation. Now, local exhaust ventilation is a true bridge subject. I don't believe you can be competent to an acceptable standard unless, as a pure occupational hygienist, you understand the engineering aspects. And indeed, if you are an engineer, you cannot function competently unless you have a good grounding and understanding of the pure occupational hygiene aspects of it. So it's this local exhaust ventilation is a kind of, we've said it before, it's a bridge subject, which brings the occupational hygiene and engineering together. I think there's still a lot of work to be done on bringing the two camps to integrate. And a lot of work has been done by organizations like BOHS and iLevy and so on this score, but there's a lot more needs to be done. So I've always had this sadness that if you talk about a gas engineer to a company, they will have the gas engineer in their mind at a higher professional level in their minds than an LEV specialist. And that's completely wrong. So, I mean, it's good for the gas engineers. They've managed through their organization like GasSafe to get this recognition and standing. And it's important because if the profession of LEV specialisms is recognized by the client base as at a certain professional level, then they will be willing to, first of all, listen to the advice and guidance more than they would otherwise. And more importantly, to expect a certain minimum standard of service, which has to be paid for. And we have this little gap at the moment where the LEV specialists are not where they ought to be. And it is important because I see an LEV specialist, and I use that word LEV specialist rather than LEV engineer because it can be the occupational hygiene people, it can be the engineers coming together in LEV specialism. And they are, to some extent, first-line defenders in the sense that when we see the statistics, and my goodness me, we don't have to go over them, but 12,000 unnecessary lung disease deaths a year. It's astounding and incredibly sad. Now, when we get to those statistics, the doctors and the medical profession are dealing with it. The NHS is dealing with it, but it's a failure. They're dealing with the failures. We're the guys right up at front who can prevent it. We're the gatekeepers. We can have a tremendous impact in preventing those unnecessary illnesses from occurring. So when we look at the medical profession, it's too late. Situation's gone. So it's very important. We are incredibly there up front in the preventative areas. And physical control by engineering means is still a key part in addressing exposures. We can, as the occupational hygiene side, we can monitor, we can measure, we can assess, we can evaluate. But very often there will be a need for some engineering control, physical control of some sort. And then yet, sadly, our industry is currently let down on a daily basis by the hopefully minority, where there are very poor instances of very poor design, installation, commissioning, testing, on such a common basis, everyday basis. So I'd like to be involved more in the future in raising professional standards, and that is both within, so that we have fewer people doing a bad job, and we are respected more by the customer. But it's to do, a lot of it will be down to education and communication, and that will be the theme as well. So those are areas that I want to work more in. In terms of understanding, I'd like to understand quantum physics string theory, but I keep reading about it, and it really does beat me. So anyone can help me out there. But yeah, I'm quite happy with the area that I'm focusing in now. I guess I have to focus my answer to that on the specialist area of engineering control, LEV. But I guess what I'm about to say has an impact on the measurement, the assessment, evaluation side of occupational hygiene as well. And that is that my genuine feeling at the moment is that we've got the practices, the processes, the physical control approach. We know that. We know. There are some areas where we can improve, but we know the fundamentals. We always have done, but it's not happening. There is some mismatch somewhere, and it seems to come down to communication. And I can tell you a story. Communication is incredibly important because you have to think about your target audience, and maybe that's the area where we're not just as good as we should be as professionals. Some of you know, I've been in for medicine. You occasionally get burglars. And I had a chap a couple of years ago who was a burglar, and I'd seen him before. And in fact, believe it or not, magistrates can deal with burglars, commercial burglary up to a certain value. And beyond that value, it has to be put to the higher court. So we have what's called a committal process. And I was telling this chap, he burgled too much money, value with cigarettes from a petrol station. He hadn't done his calculation right, and he'd stolen too many. So we couldn't deal with it. So he was being committed to the Crown Court for trial by jury. And he said to me, "What does that mean?" I said, "Well, you could be tried by a group of your peers." "What's peers?" And I said to him, "Peers they're just everyday people like you and me." And he said, "What, you mean burglars?" And he started to smile. He thought he was going to be tried by a jury of 12 burglars. So it was communication, it was wording. And I think just to finish on this, we need to get better at communication. We need to understand our audience. Our audience are clients, and we have to get into the head of the clients and what's important for them. It's about cost, and it's about not holding the job up, and not getting in the way, and all these kind of things. And we have to drive our communication through that. And it will be the key. So we have guides, we have guidance coming out of our ears. But still, I can't, every time I go into a welding workshop, there will be some people not welding within the control range of their welding hood. So how do we stop that? And I think one of my colleagues who's been a great support over the years, we had a competition to say, how can we make these people work closer? And I put it out on LinkedIn and come up with an idea about putting sensors so that they wouldn't work too far from the extraction hood. And this colleague of mine said, and it's a great idea, he said, why don't we put an advert in the Sun? And the advert in the Sun says, does the person in your life weld? You know, your son, your brother, sister, partner, do they weld? Because if they do, here's the things that will happen to them if they weld, potentially. And all the mums and dads and wives and husbands and brothers and sisters are going to be sent to their nearest and dearest, going to say, you're a welder. Do you do this? It was a brilliant idea. It's getting to the audience with the message in the way it needs to be delivered, so that it will be received and understood by the target audience. Maybe that's a competition we should put out. Maybe we should say, right, here's a competition, and maybe Oxley will do something. You've got me thinking now, Lee, that we should say, I want a communication off the wall. My original Frank, don't do it the way we've always done it. You get the same results. We need some young people with bright minds, maybe not so young, older, older heads and shoulders are good too. But we need some new ideas how to communicate what we already know, because I feel that that is one of the places where we fall short. Is in communication, and that involves education and things like that. In short, I think we need to look out for ways in which we can improve communications so that the message does get across to the people who need it. And I think that's about it.